There are places on the map that mark the path, but never reveal the secrets within. Join Terra Uncharted as we open the door to hidden mysteries, and don't forget to subscribe so you miss the next thrilling journey. The sea was calm when they left Okinawa, but everyone on the deck knew that calm seas were never to be trusted. Especially not here, on the edge of a place fishermen whispered about for generations. The Yonaguni Monument, some called it Japan's Atlantis, others dismissed it as nothing more than oddly shaped rocks. But to the crew of Blue Current, a mid-sized research charter vessel, the truth didn't matter. What mattered was the spectacle. The expedition wasn't led by a university or a government agency. It was financed by a streaming platform eager for content, fronted by a charismatic host named Derek Reeves. He had the grin of a man who could sell mysteries to the masses, and the arrogance of someone who didn't care if the truth was murky. The camera crew followed him everywhere, documenting every word, every dramatic gesture. Beside him, though, stood Keiko Tanaka, a marine archaeologist from Tokyo University who had reluctantly agreed to join. Unlike Derek, Keiko didn't believe in Atlantis or sunken empires, but she believed in stone, in structure, in the language of ruins. And the strange angles beneath Yonaguni were worth investigating, even if the cameras turned her work into entertainment. As the ship idled above the dive site, the crew prepared. Tanks clinked, masks were fitted. The cameraman adjusted his waterproof housing and made a joke about sharks. Derek, ever the showman, raised his voice. "Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we descend into the unknown. Ruins older than the pyramids, hidden just beneath these waves. Is this Japan's forgotten empire, or just the cruel trick of nature? We'll find out together." Keiko rolled her eyes, though part of her admired how easily he captivated people. For her, this wasn't about spectacle. It was about an itch in the back of her mind, a question she couldn't shake. The carvings photographed by divers in the 1980s looked too clean, too deliberate. No ocean current could carve steps that precise. The dive began at twilight, with the last light of day bleeding red across the horizon. They slipped beneath the surface, the world above vanishing into muffled silence. And then it appeared. The stone. Huge blocks loomed out of the blue haze, arranged in terraces that looked eerily like stadium seating. Staircases plunged into the abyss. Sharp corners, 90-degree angles, walls as smooth as if polished by tools. Keiko's heart raced. This was no accident of erosion. She swam closer, running her gloved hand across the stone. Grooves, symbols, maybe. Worn down by centuries of current but still whispering of intent. The cameraman circled to capture it all, his light beams cutting across the darkness. The footage would look spectacular on screen. But then came the sound. At first, Keiko thought it was the blood rushing in her ears, amplified by the regulator. A low vibration, steady and deep. But no, it was real. The stone beneath her fingertips trembled. She turned to Derek. His eyes were wide behind the mask. He had heard it, too. The sound grew louder, resonating through the water like a distant drumbeat, a rhythm that didn't belong to the ocean's randomness. It pulsed, alive, as though something below was trying to be heard. Keiko glanced down into the trench. The light from her torch faded into endless black. For a heartbeat, she thought she saw movement, something vast shifting in the dark, a ripple that had nothing to do with the current. The cameraman caught it on film, a flicker, a blur, but enough to make his breath hitch audibly in the comms. Did you see that?" his voice crackled. They hovered, frozen. The sound continued, growing louder, resonating not just in their ears but in their bones. And then, faintly, impossibly, words seemed to form within the rhythm. Not spoken, not human, but something that felt like language. Keiko's eyes widened inside her mask. She had studied ancient scripts her whole life, chasing fragments of lost civilizations. But this This was no human tongue. The pulse came again, like a choir of stone humming from the seabed. And deep below, in the abyss where the monument disappeared into shadow, two faint lights blinked open. Not reflections, not camera glare. Eyes. The three divers hung motionless in the water, suspended between the jagged terraces of Yonaguni and the void beneath them. Keiko's torch shook slightly in her hand. She wasn't the type to believe in omens or ghosts, but she knew what she saw. Two pale orbs glowing faintly from the darkness below. Eyes. Too symmetrical to be natural, too alive to dismiss. "Please tell me that's bioluminescence," Derek's voice crackled in her earpiece. His usual bravado had drained away. A squid, or an anglerfish. Keiko didn't answer. Her training told her to catalog and observe, but every instinct screamed that this was something she wasn't prepared for. The cameraman panned his light downward, catching the faint shimmer again, then losing it as if the abyss had swallowed it whole. The low, rhythmic hum still echoed through the water, reverberating in their chests like the bass line of a song too ancient for human ears. Keiko forced herself to steady her breath. "We need to surface. Now." "No." Derek's reply was sharp, panicked but stubborn. "If we leave now, we'll never get this footage again. This is it. This is the discovery. Forget pyramids. Forget ruins. This is alive." "Alive?" Keiko snapped, her voice cutting through the comms. "Derek, listen to yourself. We don't know what we're dealing with." Her words froze as the ground beneath them shifted. A vibration rolled through the terraces, strong enough to rattle the stone steps. Clouds of silt rose in spirals, obscuring visibility. For a terrifying moment, Keiko thought an earthquake had struck. But then the hum changed pitch. No longer distant, but rising, resonant, like a chorus of hundreds chanting in unison. The cameraman cursed, his beam jerking wildly. "It's the rock, the stones, singing." Keiko pressed her palm flat against the terrace wall. The vibration thrummed against her skin, steady, deliberate. Patterns, beats, almost like syllables. And then she realized the structure itself was resonating. The entire monument was not just carved, it was an instrument. The hum built into a crescendo, a pressure that made their masks rattle. Keiko clutched her regulator as pain spiked in her ears. The water seemed to vibrate, every particle charged with sound. And from the abyss below, something began to rise. The eyes reappeared first, 4 this time, then 6. Then a glimmer of pale shapes, humanoid but elongated, gliding upward with impossible grace. Their bodies seemed carved from the same stone as the monument, yet fluid, shifting like coral blooming in fast forward. Keiko's breath caught. She wanted to dismiss them as hallucinations born of nitrogen narcosis, but the cameraman's horrified gasp confirmed otherwise. "Are you getting this?" Derek whispered, his showman's tone reduced to awe. The figures didn't attack. They circled, weaving between the terraces as though studying the intruders. Their movements were synchronized, each turn and glide echoing the rhythm of the humming stone. And when they opened their mouths, if mouths they were, the water vibrated with tones that struck directly into the divers' bones. Keiko's vision swam. She recognized no words, no language, yet her mind filled with impressions. Cities swallowed by waves. Flames turned to water. Statues toppling as the ocean claimed them. A memory that wasn't hers, poured into her skull by beings that had never been human. Derek groaned, clutching his mask. "They're showing us something. History. Or, God, I don't know, prophecy." The cameraman's breathing turned ragged. I can't take this." Keiko grabbed his arm. "Focus. Don't let it pull you under." She spoke more to herself than to him. The visions were intoxicating, vast, like drowning in someone else's memory. She felt her sense of time and place unraveling. Then, just as suddenly, it stopped. The beings froze mid-circle. The humming ceased. Only the diver's ragged breathing filled the silence. And then, in a voice low and resonant, words formed. Not in English, not in Japanese, yet every syllable burned into Keiko's mind with absolute clarity. "You woke us." The water seemed to pulse with the words. The beings glowed faintly brighter, stone flesh shifting as though they were solidifying, becoming more present. Keiko's stomach twisted. "Derek, we need to leave. Now." But Derek's grin had returned, manic and feverish. "Are you hearing this? They spoke to us. This is the greatest discovery in history. Forget Atlantis. This is beyond Atlantis. A living empire." The cameraman shook his head violently. "No, man. We need to surface. Right now. This is wrong." Keiko grabbed Derek's arm. "Listen to me. Some doors aren't meant to be opened. You know that sound? That wasn't a song. It was a warning." The stone beneath them vibrated again, softer now, like a heartbeat receding into silence. The beings slowly drifted back toward the abyss, but not before one tilted its head, fixing Keiko with eyes that glowed like moons through the dark. And into her mind, a final whisper. "We wait." The figures vanished below the terraces, swallowed by the black. The humming ceased, leaving the divers alone in crushing silence. Keiko shivered. She had the sickening certainty that they hadn't just witnessed something extraordinary, they had been chosen. When they broke the surface minutes later, Derek was already rehearsing the headlines he'd delivered to the world. Keiko, however, stared back at the water, her stomach knotted. She couldn't shake the feeling that the ruins weren't ruins at all. They were a doorway. And now it had been opened. The dive boat rocked gently against the swells as Keiko hauled herself up the ladder, her limbs trembling more from shock than exertion. The night air felt thin and unreal, the surface of the Pacific strangely calm after the visions below. The cameraman stumbled aboard next, fumbling with his helmet, his eyes wide and glassy. Derek followed last, still grinning as though he'd just won a lottery. His mask was crooked, his hair plastered to his forehead, but his excitement burned brighter than any exhaustion. "They spoke to us," he gasped, ripping off his regulator. "Do you understand? This is it, Keiko. Yonaguni isn't ruins. It's inhabited. They're alive down there. A lost empire. No, a living empire." Keiko pulled off her mask and glared at him, her chest still heaving. "You don't get it. They weren't welcoming us. They were warning us. We're not supposed to be there." The cameraman sat on the deck, rocking slightly, whispering to himself. Eyes in the dark. Voices in my head. I felt like they were pulling me apart. Derek ignored him. He rushed to his equipment bag, pulling out a notepad already smudged with seawater, scribbling furiously. "When we broadcast this, the world will change. No one will talk about Atlantis anymore. Yonaguni will be the new Rosetta Stone of the oceans." Keiko clenched her fists. She wanted to shake him, to force him to listen. But before she could speak, the deckhand shouted, "Boat!" Everyone turned. Out of the mist, another vessel approached, an old wooden fishing boat, its hull weathered and scarred from decades at sea. Lanterns glowed along its sides, flickering in the salt air. As it drew closer, Keiko saw the faces of several fishermen staring grimly from the deck. The two boats bumped sides with a dull thud. An elderly fisherman, his skin like sun-bleached leather, leaned over the rail. His voice carried, deep and commanding despite the wind. "You dived the stones." It wasn't a question. Keiko froze. The man's eyes were sharp, filled with the kind of certainty that comes from too many years of hard truths. "Yes," Derek said proudly, stepping forward, "and we found them. Beings, alive, intelligent. The world needs to know." The old fisherman spat overboard, the gesture more ritual than disdain. "You fools. The ocean remembers what it swallows. It never gives back." Keiko stepped forward cautiously. "You've heard of them?" The old man's gaze fixed on her. For a moment, Keiko felt as though he were seeing through her, reading the memory of what had happened below. "They are not your discovery," he said, his voice heavy as stone. "They are the drowned, the forgotten. Their empire sank for a reason. To wake them is to wake the tide that buried them." The cameraman whimpered, clutching his head. Derek laughed nervously. "Old stories. Superstition. With respect, sir, we have footage. Real evidence. This isn't folklore." The fisherman's face darkened. "And do you think evidence will save you when the ocean sings?" At those words, Keiko's stomach twisted. The fisherman had said sings, the exact word. Before she could question him, a gust of wind rattled through the rigging. The lanterns on the fishing boat flickered violently. And then, from below the waves, a low vibration rolled across the water. Soft at first, then building like a distant drumbeat. The fishermen shouted, scrambling to secure their nets. The old man lifted his hand in a warning gesture. "It begins." The dive boat rocked harder, the sea churning though no storm cloud touched the sky. The humming deepened, vibrating through the hull until every bolt rattled. Derek's face lit with manic excitement. "They're speaking again. Keiko, don't you see? They're reaching out to us even here." "No." Keiko's voice cracked. "This isn't speech. This is a summons." The water between the boats began to glow faintly, as if lit from below. Shapes moved beneath the surface, too large, too fluid to be fish. The cameraman cried out, fumbling for his camera, but his hands shook too violently to hold it steady. One of the fishermen shouted something in Japanese that Keiko barely caught. "Koshin no uta," the song of the drowned. And then, with a roar like an underwater avalanche, a geyser of seawater erupted between the boats. The deck pitched violently, throwing Keiko to her knees. Through the spray, she saw something. Stone-like arms breaking the surface, covered in barnacles and coral, groping as though reaching for air after centuries of silence. The old fisherman crossed himself, shouting over the chaos. "You open the gate! Now the tide will not rest!" The geyser subsided, leaving only ripples and silence. But the humming continued, deeper now, resonating from the seafloor itself. Derek staggered forward, drenched, his grin wider than ever. "Did you see that? Did you see that? This isn't danger, Keiko. It's invitation." Keiko's heart pounded. She stared at the water where the arms had appeared, her skin crawling with dread. Whatever had stirred down there wasn't inviting them. It was rising. The ocean had calmed unnaturally fast, as if the geyser and the glowing water were only a dream. Yet the silence carried weight. A waiting silence, thick and suffocating. Keiko sat on the edge of the deck, her wetsuit dripping, her hands trembling as she tried to steady her breath. Across from her, Derek paced like a man intoxicated, his eyes gleaming. "Don't you see? This is bigger than any myth. We're standing on the brink of rewriting history. The drowned empire isn't just ruins, it's alive. They want us to find them." The old fisherman's boat lingered nearby, lanterns flickering. Its crew huddled together, whispering prayers, refusing to meet the diver's eyes. The elder himself watched grimly, arms folded, as though already mourning them. Keiko wanted to shout, to shake Derek, but her voice failed. The humming hadn't stopped. It thrummed through her bones, an undercurrent beneath every thought, and she wasn't the only one who felt it. The cameraman, slumped against the railing, began to mutter. At first it was gibberish, fragmented syllables spilling from his cracked lips, but as Keiko leaned closer, her blood turned to ice. He was singing. The tune was low, guttural, carrying the same rhythm as the vibrations from the deep. His head lolled back, eyes unfocused as though someone else was moving his tongue. "Stop him!" Keiko cried. Derek turned, startled. "What? He's just—" The cameraman's voice rose, the sound weaving through the air like threads of seawater, too alien to belong to a human throat. The fishermen across the way shouted, crossing themselves. One even threw a bucket of salt into the ocean as if to ward off evil. Keiko grabbed the cameraman by the shoulders, shaking him. His eyes rolled white. Salt water spilled from his mouth, though he hadn't touched the sea since climbing aboard. "He's drowning," Keiko whispered. "He's drowning on dry land." Derek pulled her back. "No, listen. He's channeling them. This is proof. Direct communication. Keiko, we can record this." "Are you insane?" she snapped. "He's not channeling. He's being consumed." The cameraman convulsed, body seizing against the deck. His song reached a fever pitch, loud enough that the metal hull rattled. The fisherman shouted again, pointing toward the water. Keiko followed their gaze. The sea beneath the cameraman shimmered, as if drawn to his voice. Shadows stirred below the surface, circling like predators around a wounded animal. "No!" Keiko lunged forward, trying to cover his mouth to stop the chant, but his jaw locked, teeth clamped unnaturally wide as though pried open by invisible hands. Suddenly, with a sickening crack, one of the deck boards split. From the gap, seawater bubbled up, spraying across the deck. The cameraman's song cut off mid-note, replaced by a gurgling scream. The old fisherman shouted something that Keiko didn't fully catch, but the meaning was clear. "They're coming through." Keiko and Derek hauled the cameraman back as the water surged higher. His eyes fluttered, returning to focus for the briefest moment. He grabbed Keiko's wrist with desperate strength. "They sing. Beneath the bones," he gasped. "If we follow, we never come back." And then he collapsed, unconscious. The deck stank of salt and rot, like a graveyard unearthed. Derek knelt beside the man, his face pale but still burning with fanaticism. "You heard him," he whispered. "They're guiding us. Beneath the bones. It's a map." Keiko recoiled. "No, it's a warning. He nearly died." Derek's voice rose, trembling with obsession. "Every discovery is paid in blood, Keiko. You think history will remember his suffering? No. They'll remember that we proved the drowned empire lives, that we spoke with them." Keiko turned toward the fisherman's boat. The elder shook his head slowly, eyes dark with pity. "The tide has chosen," he called across the waves. "Leave now, or the ocean will claim you all." But Derek only laughed, the sound wild and hollow. "Leave? When we're this close? No, we dive again. Tomorrow at dawn." Keiko's heart twisted. She stared at the unconscious cameraman, at the cracked deck still wet with seawater, at the glowing shapes still stirring below. The ocean wasn't inviting them. It was opening its mouth. Dawn broke with a gray sky, the horizon bruised with lingering storm clouds. The ocean looked deceptively calm, its surface like glass. But Keiko felt it. The same oppressive hum beneath her skin, the same pressure in her chest that had haunted her dreams through the night. She had dreamed of corridors of stone lined with faces that were not quite human. They had sung to her in silence, mouths moving in unison, and when she woke, the echo lingered in her ears. On deck, Derek moved with manic determination. He had polished the diving helmets, checked the oxygen tanks 3 times, and rehearsed hand signals with a fervor bordering on desperation. His eyes gleamed as though fever had taken root in him. The cameraman, still pale and weakened, protested weakly from his cot. You can't go back down there. I heard them. They want you to follow. That song, it wasn't a gift, it was bait." Derek ignored him. "Every discovery demands a price. If you're too afraid, stay here. But I will not let fear steal history from us." Keiko's hands shook as she secured her wetsuit. She had considered refusing, but part of her, against all reason, needed answers. She had grown up hearing whispers of Yonaguni's ruins, of gods and kings who vanished beneath the waves. Now she had seen the truth. The ruins were real, and something still lived there. The old fisherman's boat floated nearby, lanterns dim in the morning fog. The elder called out again, his voice hoarse. "Turn back. What sleeps beneath is not for us. You follow their song, you will not return." Derek didn't even look his way. He and Keiko lowered themselves into the sea, oxygen tanks hissing, lights strapped to their helmets. The water swallowed them whole. At first, the descent was uneventful. The light from the surface thinned, giving way to a twilight world of drifting plankton and swaying fronds of seaweed. Fish scattered at their approach, flashing silver before vanishing into darkness. But as they neared the plateau of Yonaguni, the water thickened with silt. Columns of stone rose around them, angled and geometric, too precise to be mistaken for mere geology. Steps descended into shadow, leading deeper into the drowned city. Keiko's heart pounded. The last time they'd seen these ruins, they had been empty. Now, as her light passed across the surfaces, she saw carvings, faces, dozens of them, etched into stone. Faces half human, half alien, their mouths open as if frozen mid-song. Her breath caught. Derek. These weren't here before. His voice crackled through the comms, tight with awe. They've always been here. We just didn't see them. This is proof. A living culture, preserved in the deep. They pressed on. The humming grew louder. It wasn't vibration this time, but something that resonated directly in their skulls, bypassing the water, bypassing sound itself. Keiko grimaced, gripping her helmet, but Derek swam faster, following it like a moth to flame. They entered a massive archway, its stones slick with algae, leading into a cavernous hall. And there, for the first time, Keiko saw movement. Figures stood among the pillars. At first, she thought they were statues, gray-skinned, tall, with elongated arms and webbed fingers, but then one tilted its head, following her light. Her blood turned to ice. They were breathing. The creatures' chests rose and fell slowly, in rhythm with the hum. Their eyes glowed faintly, reflecting the divers' lamps. One opened its mouth, releasing a ripple of bubbles. No words, only a note, a tone that slid directly into Keiko's bones. More answered. The entire hall vibrated with a choir of the deep, layered harmonics that no human throat could ever produce. Derek laughed, wild and breathless. "Do you hear it? They're welcoming us." Keiko's instincts screamed otherwise. The song was not a greeting. It was a claiming. The creatures stepped forward. Their movements were deliberate, graceful, as if underwater drag meant nothing to them. Their bodies shimmered faintly, almost translucent, as though they were only half in this world. Keiko tried to signal Derek to retreat, but he swam closer, arms outstretched. "We're not intruders. We're explorers. We come in peace." The nearest figure stopped inches from him. Its face was eerily human, too human, but its eyes were vast and depthless, like looking into the trench itself. Slowly, it raised its hand and touched Derek's helmet. For a moment, everything went silent. Then Derek convulsed. His body jerked as if electricity coursed through him. His lights flickered, his breathing turned ragged. The creature pressed its palm against the glass of his helmet, and Derek's voice flooded the comms. Except it wasn't his voice anymore. It was layered, distorted, many voices speaking through him. "You follow the song. You are chosen. You will remain." Keiko's scream was lost in the bubbling dark. She pulled at Derek, trying to drag him back, but his limbs locked, stiff as stone. His eyes rolled back, glowing faintly with the same light as the creatures. And then he sang. The same guttural tones as the cameraman the night before, but stronger, deeper, vibrating the entire hall. The creatures joined in, harmonizing until the stone itself seemed to breathe with them. Keiko backed away, panic clawing at her chest. The choir surrounded Derek, their bodies weaving in hypnotic rhythm. He was no longer struggling. He was one of them. Through the rising wall of sound, Keiko heard a single, clear phrase cut through, as though whispered directly into her skull. "One must stay, so the others may leave." Her heart froze. Did they mean Derek? Or her? The cavern pulsed with light, the city itself alive with song. And Keiko realized with dawning horror that the drowned empire wasn't ruins at all. It was waking up. The ocean around Keiko pulsed with a pressure that seemed to squeeze the very breath out of her lungs. The carvings, no, not carvings, but frozen faces, gleamed all around, fossilized remnants of those who had stood here before. Their hollow eyes seemed to plead with her. We stayed, and we were claimed. Derek stood in the center of the plaza, his silhouette wavering in the bioluminescent glow. But his voice was no longer his own. It rolled out like a tide, carrying whispers in a language older than Japan itself. The glowing veins of coral spread across his arms, snaking up his neck, etching ancient sigils into his flesh. He looked both alive and no longer human. "Don't fight it, Keiko," he said, though his voice split into echoes, as though a chorus of 100 voices spoke through him. "This is what they wanted. We are part of them now." Keiko's instincts screamed. She stumbled backward, her flippers scraping the stone floor. The plaza hummed louder, resonating with Derek's every word. The great arches above her quivered, and for a horrifying second she thought the entire ruin might come crashing down. She shouted through her comms, her voice ragged. "Derek, you have to fight it. We didn't come here to—" But the rest of her words were drowned by the song. It wasn't a melody. It was a pulse, a vibration that rattled her ribcage and made her teeth ache. From every tunnel leading into the plaza, shadows began to pour forth, elongated forms that moved with the weight of centuries. They weren't fish. They weren't people. They were something in between, shrouded in faint, glowing threads of algae. The methane choir. Keiko's air gauge flashed red. 90 seconds of oxygen. She had to move. She lunged forward, grabbing Derek's shoulder. For a moment, his eyes flickered. The man she had known was still in there, trapped beneath the layers of song. His lips trembled as though he wanted to speak, but the voices inside him smothered the words. "Go," he whispered, barely audible over the chorus. "If you stay, it takes you too." Keiko shook her head violently. "Not without you." The ground convulsed. Methane bubbled up from cracks in the stone, igniting faint flashes of blue light that streaked like lightning across the sea floor. The choir sang louder, and the vibrations threatened to burst Keiko's eardrums. Derek fell to his knees, screaming, but it wasn't pain. It was surrender. The carvings on his skin now blazed with a fierce, unearthly glow. Keiko realized then he was lost. Tears blurred her vision as she pushed off the sea floor, kicking hard for the nearest exit tunnel. The shadows of the choir lunged after her, their forms twisting and dissolving like smoke in water. Every second was agony. Her oxygen fell to 60 seconds. 50. The tunnels of Yonaguni twisted like a labyrinth. Several times she almost turned back, but the memory of Derek's whispered plea drove her on. The walls glowed faintly, as if trying to lure her deeper. But then, up ahead, she saw it. A shaft of faint, silvery light filtering down from the surface. Her chest burned. Her lungs screamed. She kicked harder. 30 seconds. 20. Behind her, the voices still sang. The hymn followed her, curling around her mind like a net. For one terrifying moment, she thought she saw Derek's reflection in the water beside her, swimming at her shoulder. His face calm, serene, beckoning. Stay. "No!" she screamed into her regulator, bubbles exploding around her. She tore her gaze upward, focusing only on the rippling light above. Her oxygen hit 0. Panic constricted her chest. She ripped the regulator from her mouth and surged upward, fighting against the crushing weight of the sea. Darkness crowded her vision. Her limbs grew heavy. Then, air. She broke the surface with a desperate gasp, coughing seawater, clawing for breath. Above her, the storm had cleared, leaving only a sky strewn with stars. The boat that had dropped them here was gone. Only debris floated, a splintered plank, a coil of rope, a cracked floodlight bobbing in the swell. She clung to a piece of driftwood, sucking in air until the pain in her lungs eased. But the ocean was not silent. Even here on the surface, the song lingered, faint, haunting, rising from the depths. And then she saw him, a figure standing atop a swell far out at sea. For a heartbeat she thought it was Derek, alive and free. But the silhouette did not move like a man. Its arms stretched impossibly long, its eyes glowed faintly even from this distance, and when it opened its mouth, the song surged again, rolling across the waves, echoing in her bones. Keiko squeezed her eyes shut, trembling. She knew the sound would never leave her. She was marked now, chosen by the empire below, and Derek was no longer hers. He belonged to them. The horizon began to glow with dawn, but for Keiko, the night would never end. The empire beneath Yonaguni had not crumbled. It waited, alive and patient, singing its hymn into the marrow of those who dared to listen. Do you believe the Sunken Empire is real, or just another legend swallowed by the sea? Tell me in the comments if you dared to dive into its ruins.